Alrighty, Rare Petro audience, welcome back. We've got another episode of the Industry Leader Spotlight, and today I am very excited to welcome the youngest guest that we've actually featured, Miss Ashley Zumwalt-Forbes. Thank you for coming to the show, Ashley.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
Of course. So Ashley is the co-founder and president at Black Mountain International. She has a Bachelor's of Science in Petroleum Engineering from the University of Oklahoma and an MBA from Harvard Business School. She's also been featured in the Forbes 30 Under 30, and I gotta say, I'm excited to be a part of this interview because I myself grew up in a very small town. So can you give us your origin story? How did you get started in oil and gas? What kicked it off?
Absolutely. I'm interested to hear what town you're from too, so we'll have to circle back to
Of
that.
course.
So I am from a town in Oklahoma, east of Oklahoma City called Choctaw. And I was raised by a really hardworking family that was really ingrained for me from an early start. And for that, forever thankful and think it really set kind of my principles for life.
Absolutely.
And for how to approach challenges and approach work. But I was the first person in my immediate family to attend university. And so I didn't really know what my options were or what I wanted to do or, what
Who
you
does,
could
right?
conceivably do. From Oklahoma though, so we have quite a bit of oil and gas, as we all know.
Yep.
And I saw oil and gas as an interesting way to, kind of get out of my town, get to travel, get to tackle these big, interesting challenges. And ultimately, I think that energy business and obviously oil and gas being a piece of that is one of those businesses that, you can really feel the impact you're making. Because there's no sure way to improve someone's quality of life than raising them out of energy poverty.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's just, connecting them to electricity or, making their power bills cheaper and more affordable, I think it's amazing. So it's something I started because it's kind of all I knew. And I've stayed in it because I love the impact you feel on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm. And then this is the Industry Leader podcast series, so some of those may not have heard of you, not yet, of course, but can you explain how you kind of became an industry leader? How and when did you decide to start your own business?
Yes, great question. So again, my background is petroleum engineering, went to the University of Oklahoma, and I was a drilling and completions engineer at ExxonMobil. I loved it because, I liked that kind of large scale project management. I did international shale exploration, which means I was kind of the first person or one of the first people in the country. So really got to do a huge range of activities, much more than generally you'd get to do as a normal drilling or completions engineer. So procurement, trying to figure out regulations, the whole gamut. But I also, on the same token, just didn't like being at a large company. And so knew I wanted to make that transition. And so for me, and I'm not saying this is everyone's transition, I get a lot of questions about MBAs. And so for me, I went and got an MBA, and it ended up being a great transition point for me. Do I think you have to have an MBA? No, but it was incredibly helpful for me. So that's my little spiel there. But I did go get an MBA, and ended up, through networking within the oil and gas private equity space, ended up meeting a guy named Rhett Bennett, who's now who's CEO of all the Black Mountain companies. And at the time, he's still a super young guy, but at the time he was like 36 or 37 and had started 9 companies since 2007. And I was like, look, if I'm trying to go learn from someone how to do this, it's going to be him. Like, I want to be him when I'm, in 6 years time. Like, I want to be this man. And so ended up being an amazing decision. So I actually joined the Black Mountain Oil and Gas Group, but within 4 months had co-founded Black Mountain Metals. So
4
that,
months.
we went to Australia, or I went to Australia, set up our Perth office and raised $75 million to go buy some nickel sulfide mines. So that's specifically what goes in lithium ion batteries. And then a year later, co-founded my second company called Black Mountain Exploration, In there, we own 1.7 million acres of tight gas acreage, also in Australia. And then in March of this year, co-founded my third company, Black Mountain Oil and Gas in Abu Dhabi. So my time zones are crazy. That's really the summary.
I was gonna say, I bet there's probably lots of meetings at just obscure hours.
Very odd, very odd. I know my husband is still like, what? Oh, like, why are you waking up in the middle of the night for these random calls? Like, what are you doing?
And then I want to circle back to education because you talked about it so clearly. Yeah, MBA also. You did a little bit with energy law at OU again, right?
I did. So that was really interesting. So I kind of subscribe to this theory that you're never done learning. Like you're never, just like everything you need to know, and you're just going to go embark on your journey, and away you go.
Uh-huh.
And you can do that in a formal or informal capacity. And I think particularly informal continuous education is vital, particularly in today's day and age where things are evolving so quickly. But for me, the OU, so again, I'm OU alma mater for my bachelor's degree. The OU College of Law offered a really interesting master's in legal studies focused on the oil and gas business, so specifically U.S. oil and gas. And I do quite a lot in the tangible assets space. And so even though it was specifically focused on oil and gas, it was really helpful in kind of understanding the legal side of mining transactions or real estate transactions or any type of tangible asset. So for me, going back for that formal education piece was a great check in the box on continuous education. But again, you can do it informally, you can do it formally. And I think on the formal side, you just need to begin with the end in mind. Like, what is it that I'm trying to get out of this degree?
Definitely. And so I guess it makes it easy if you've got the mindset that you're always learning. Does that
Yeah.
make it easy to balance the school, the work, everything that you did, or was it kind of difficult to balance time between all aspects of life because you've
Oh,
got an
look,
illustrious career in such a short amount of time?
it was wild. So it was, let's see, I graduated from business school in 2017. And so founded Black Mountain Metals kind of that January 2018.
Hmm.
Also in 2018, I got engaged in February of 2018.
Congratulations. A little
Thank
late,
you.
but
And then I went back to school to get this master's degree. Thankfully, it was all online, but it was insane. So, trying to found a company, get my third degree, my second master's, and then plan a wedding was just I really don't recommend it. I don't recommend it to anyone. But, look, I jokes aside, like I do think you find time for what's important to you. And for me, continuing education and just trying to figure out what is going to be relevant in the future and how you can keep your professional skills sharp and relevant,
Mhm.
I think is very important. And so although, it was and continues to be a very, very busy time, you're going to fill your time with something. So, if you're going to be filling your time, you should do it with things that you think make an impact.
Mhm.
And for me, that's certainly one of my pillars.
Alrighty. And then we've kind of gone through all the questions we typically ask someone, but since you are the youngest that we've had on the show, I'd like to
Woohoo!
move into the future. There's still plenty of room to grow. So,
Yes.
where do you see yourself? Will you stay with natural resources, or do you think your entrepreneurial itch will maybe drive you into a different aspect, a different industry?
Yep. Look, I would be very surprised if I transitioned away from natural resources or, kind of this tangible assets group. I know I keep repeating that bizarre phrase, tangible assets, but it's always the way I've described what I'm interested in. So I really like to be able to see something. Like if I can see it, I can touch it, like you own that.
Hmm.
It like the technology and like things in the cloud, et cetera. I get how it creates value, but it is just not my thing. It is
Uh-huh.
not I think. And so I would be genuinely shocked if I transitioned away from natural resources. And I really think it comes back to what I said, in my very first kind of answer, that it's hard to find a business where you truly feel like you're making more of an impact. You're impacting people's everyday lives. Everything we own includes something from the oil and gas business or something from the mining and metal space. It's really that foundational group of industries that enable our world to run. I'd say second order to that, I do think it's filled with some of the most interesting people, and I absolutely love the personalities involved in the space. And I think they're both very conducive to being entrepreneurial. So both businesses were very much built by entrepreneurs, and people just getting out there and try to make it happen. So I'd love to keep getting out there and keep making it happen.
I love to hear that. And then now, want to pick your brain as an expert in not only energy but tangible resources, like you say. So, what are your thoughts on this current downturn? And also, if you could, the growing negative sentiment with oil and gas or maybe other resources.
Yes. This is my favorite subject, so thank you for asking. So, I'm going to tackle that second piece first. And, in our modern world, we're all very focused on the energy transition and how to achieve decarbonization. And I am right there with everyone else. These are things we have to do in order to ensure human survival going forward. What I don't agree with is that fossil fuels people see renewables as the enemy, and renewables see fossil fuels as the enemy. Where in reality, if you're actually looking at tackling this massive challenge on a granular basis, like actually thinking through the operations of how to make the transition, the capital piece of how we're going to fund the transition, there is no way that either group can stand on their own. It's not going to work. So I'm an extreme advocate for coming together, kind of holding hands as fossil fuels and renewables, and trying to figure out a more blended approach and actually how to make a sustainable shift while keeping power prices low, but every bit hitting our carbon emissions goals. And so for me, what that looks like is on the fossil fuel side, I am incredibly bullish natural gas, which you would have heard because I co-founded two natural gas companies. Huge fan. So I think natural gas gets a bit of a bad reputation because it is lumped in as a fossil fuel. But what people don't take the time to dig through is the various fossil fuels have incredibly different emissions profiles. And so I think if you actually sit down and look at the emissions profiles on the fossil fuel side versus the emissions profiles of the supply chains of the various renewable energies, you can come up with a really interesting, compelling, responsible plan going forward around how we can actually achieve the energy transition. So for me, like, the oil and gas business is not dead. I think it's a bit overplayed. And I think, folks tend to have knee-jerk reactions in big times of transition, particularly when the world is falling apart with COVID-19 this year. So I think what's going to happen is all the investment that is currently running away from the space, inevitably, we're going to look up in a year or two and say, like, ooh, man, maybe that was kind of short-sighted. And we're going to have to remediate some of that lack of investment. So I think the more people young in their career, entrepreneurs, or just generally business professionals can kind of get on the front foot, trying to think through how to marry those concepts and really have a sustainable plan, I think the better off, like, everyone's careers are going to be. But second to that, I think the better off the world's going to be.
No, definitely. I couldn't agree more. I think the future is definitely going to revolve around a balanced and diverse energy portfolio. So we need to work to become energy specialists, not environmental engineers over here and then
Yeah,
petroleum and engineers over there. We've got to work together.
absolutely. We absolutely do. I think we're all environmental engineers. I
Oh, of
think
course.
when I was at ExxonMobil, Rex Tillerson was still CEO, and he had this famous quote that I have it's really stuck with me. But he said, everyone's first job at ExxonMobil is risk management. And like that is everyone's first job is, making sure we don't take on too much risk. And so it's something that, it really stuck out to me as that is a bold statement. Like you are making it crystal clear where the company stands on who is responsible, like who is going to be left holding
Uh,
the bag, and it is everyone. And that's really how I feel about everyone in the energy business with being an environmental engineer. Like, all right, guys, we got to figure this out. Like, people are counting on us,
mhm.
much like with COVID-19. The world was completely sidelined, and that was and continues to be the time for scientists and doctors in our medical community to step up, and they're really proving themselves. So I'm hoping the energy business is able to come together and knock it out of the park.
All right. And then on that subject of coronavirus, of course, the whole world's affected, but you personally,
All
young
of it.
businesses, young projects, how has Black Mountain tried to navigate these waters with, well, COVID?
Yeah, look, it's been a nightmare. 2020 has been a bad year. I think if anybody tells you that they have not had a bad year, they are lying to you, and you need to call them on it. But no, look, I would say it's been particularly tough because we're a global business. And so, we're in the US, we're in Australia, we're in the UAE, and nobody can get between any of those countries anymore. So pre-COVID, I was spending kind of 75% of my time in Australia. And then come March 15th, I'm completely grounded in the US, have
Yeah.
not left the US since then. Um, and so that's tough when I don't get FaceTime with my teams, or, get to have those critical negotiations, critical meetings in person.
Mhm.
So it very much it's been a year of don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Like you just figure it out. And I do think the quicker we all kind of come to terms with, um, you know, this is the new normal, the easier it's going to be for us all, because having Zoom meetings not as ideal as in person, but
Not at
you
all.
can still get it done. You can get
Uh-huh.
it done, you can figure it out. And I'm really proud of how people have responded, but it has been a very tough year.
Oh, yeah. And then in response to this very tough year, what things will come out of it? How will the energy industry and or tangible resources, how will
Thank
those change?
Look, so I going into coronavirus, I just kept maintaining that electric vehicles were going to be a big winner out of all of this, because it became very clear that we were going to have massive, massive government subsidy packages to
Mhm.
try to bail out the economy. And so a great way in a common way for governments to try to influence business policy or kind of decisions, for their citizens is incentivizing various behaviors with subsidies.
Yep.
And so, again, we mine battery metals in Australia. And so electric vehicles are something that, I really focus on adoption percentages and trying to figure out where it's going to take off first, how quickly, et cetera. Um, we're there. So I will say, like, almost every government subsidy package, particularly in places like Europe, um, and in places like China, have really been encouraging, the purchase of electric vehicles. And so that's something we've seen a huge spike. And so inevitably, like, they are here to stay. Like, we're almost getting to the point where there's like critical mass. You're almost to the tipping point on internal combustion engine
Mhm.
versus EV cost parity. And at that stage, the market really starts to flood. And
Definitely.
so I think that's something that will continue to be. I also think a way the energy business will transition out of this is increased focus on energy storage, and how to kind of get creative around bridging that renewable power gap during hours of non-renewable energy generation. So I do think energy storage is going to be another big winner out of this. Oil and gas, not a big winner out of this, but I do think give it a couple years and folks will realize like it is a critical piece of the pie. It's not going to be a 2020 winner though.
No, I like the way you describe all of this too, like critical mass between legislation in California that we've seen even just last week, or
100%.
developing technologies for batteries to solve those problems of intermittency.
Yes.
You're in a good position either way. I mean, it's nice to have your hands in both sides, although I don't like
We'll
to.
see.
Uh,
Yet to be determined.
and then there's a lot of young people my age who listen to this podcast. I have colleagues I graduated with who are in oil and gas, who are not in oil and gas, who are just in the energy industry. So, what advice do you have for them? I mean, young 20 something, not too far off from you. What is the best thing they can do to decide maybe whether or not to enter the industry, career trajectories, and navigating energy?
Yep. Best advice is just remember that no decision you make is permanent. So if you decide to, or rather, there are very few decisions in life
Okay, okay.
you make that are permanent. Let me take a step back there.
Yeah, I've got some bad tattoos that would beg
I
to
know.
differ.
Look, I don't know what to tell you about that, but no. So look, I do think, folks, and I remember when I was leaving university or in my early 20s, I would agonize over career decisions. And it's, do I want to go in the oil and gas business? What if I want to go into renewables eventually? What if oil and gas starts declining? The good news is all of those outcomes are fine. Like if you do decide to enter the oil and gas business, which I encourage you to, it was a great learning ground for me and a great place to sharpen your skills. You can always make a decision that, hey, actually energy storage over there looks interesting. Like I'm going to go check it out for a little bit. I might be back. I might not. I don't know. And that's okay. I think, the old model of careers was very linear. And now in today's modern world, the average time to keep a job is like 3 years. And people change industries, change companies, change positions, functions, and you need to get out there and see different things because the more diverse your viewpoint, the better business decisions you're going to be able to make for your company and for yourself. So I would say just try to keep an open mind, continuously learn and keep your skills relevant, and you will always be able to pivot as you go along. So don't put too much pressure on yourself to land the 100% perfect thing. You will get there. You figure it out as you go along.
And I love to hear that. I mean, really, as young professionals, we can do anything. There's no reason to pigeonhole yourself into something when you
No.
can continue to grow and learn new things.
For sure. And you
So,
can go do something different in the future. You don't like it? That's okay. Figure something else out.
I love that mindset. Then, also, talking about mindsets, I did read somewhere that as a young professional being successful, something you dealt with a lot was imposter syndrome.
Mhm.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. So look, I mean, I was 28 when I co-founded my first company, and it was a global battery metals mining company. I didn't know anything about mining. I knew I had like 2 months of starting to learn about mining, and a couple of months of researching battery chemistries, and I was like off trying to go buy some nickel mines, and it was horrifying, like to the depths of my soul. It was a very, very intimidating experience.
Oh, yeah.
I had a lot of conviction that, what we were doing was the right thing and we were going to create a lot of value for investors. And I just loved that, it felt like we were really pioneering that electrification space for oil and gas people. What I ended up learning on how to deal with imposter syndrome, which again, deal with it every day to this day of like, what am I doing here? But, you don't personally have to know everything. In fact, like you shouldn't, like you should
Nobody
not know
does.
everything. you need to know the people to ask the right questions to. So hire the right people, have the right mentors, have the right friends, contacts, across the board. You need to be able to reach out to those smart people who do know the answers, and learn from them and develop from them over time. But you don't have to have all the answers. And once I realized that, it did make me feel less kind of out of place. But it is, I mean, imposter syndrome's hard. Like you really do, every day you wake up and you're like, man, I have this meeting with like, the president or, whoever it is. It's like, it's shocking. It's shocking. Okay.
And then, I mean, being a young professional, you're probably, well, I know you're on LinkedIn. I've looked at your profile and research for this interview, but networking, clearly a big point, like you've just mentioned. How has that changed with coronavirus? I mean, you can't do that FaceTime we were talking about. Is it all just interviews with some random kid?
Yes. So yes, it is. No, so it does go back to LinkedIn. Like, I think LinkedIn is the most underrated business tool. Like, it's literally what helped me start Black Mountain Metals. I was reaching out, I would read about a company online, and then I'd look that company up on LinkedIn, and I'd reach out to the CEO and ask if they'd talk to me and explain what they were doing. I'd like an 80% hit rate. Like, people
Really?
will talk to you. People will talk to you. If you genuinely go to them with like, hey, this is what I'm thinking about. These are the questions I have. Can you or someone else in the business talk to me? And I know I generally am very responsive to those types of requests. I try to carve out time in my calendar weekly to talk to people and just help them kind of think through their upcoming decisions, because so many people have done that for me, and it really changed my life. So I will say LinkedIn has been incredibly valuable, from a networking standpoint, but also literally from like starting businesses standpoint. And also I've hired a bunch of people off of LinkedIn because I have a recruiter profile, so I can I can find like anybody. And then I'd also say, now is a weird time, so the usual networking tips don't work. Like,
Yeah.
I usually go to various kind of industry conferences, and really go out of my way to introduce myself to new people, talk to new people. We're just not there right now, so
No, it's
I'd
tough
say, yeah, it's tough.
to get someone's attention in a little chat box in the side of a virtual conference. I mean, I do my best to add people, but
It's hard. It's hard. I know. Look, it's a bad year. It's a bad year.
Well, I think that takes us through all the questions we wanted to ask. So, is there anything else you'd like to highlight, illustrate, or really exemplify from this interview before we draw it to a close?
Yeah, look, I think it goes back to, I know I'm kind of the youngest person on the podcast so far, but I should not be the last young person. And so I'm talking to the audience here. Like, I think so often in life we think, look, I just need 10 more years. I need 10 more years of, getting some experience, like proving myself, building a reputation, and then I'm going to go out and I'm going to take that big swing and I'm going to try to go for it. You don't need to wait. Like, you really don't need to wait. If you have an idea or have conviction around something or want to build something, start a company, you should just go do it. Like, I know it's really easy to say that, but it goes back to my original point of like, no decision, few decisions are permanent. Go try to start something, go try to get your dream job, because just because we're young, I think we just bring an incredibly interesting perspective and skill set to bear around, sometimes bringing fresh eyes, and you identify better opportunities than someone who's been looking at it for 30 years. So don't just write yourself off because you're young or because you're in your first job, your entry level position or whatever, you need to get out there and really try to improve the world, because we have a lot of huge challenges that need smart, energetic, passionate people trying to tackle them. And there's no reason it can't be you. So that's what I would leave people with. I know it's easy to say, like, I'm 30 now, so, very mature over here, and I've turned over to 30s. But in my 20s, people would say, like, how old are you? I'm like, oh, 28. And they're like, what are you doing over here? Don't listen to those people. Go prove them wrong.
Uh-huh. Well, that is wildly inspiring. So, again, thank you for coming on the show. If you'd like to learn more about Ashley, you can find her on LinkedIn. I'll put the information to reach blackmountain.com here in my hand and down below in the link to the video. So, again, Ashley, thank you.
No problem. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for your contributions. And until we see you next time, everybody, take care.